What is up, ladies and gentlemen? Steven Ostentoski here of Maize and Brew, bringing you another video here. Today, we're going to be talking about the immediate impact freshmen, a top 5 here for the class of 2020. Again, with this season, we have a free year of eligibility for everyone across the board, but especially for the freshmen, that means you'll see more freshmen this year than we've ever seen before get meaningful playing time. I think the depth chart allows this to be a case where Michigan will really take advantage of that as well. Before we get into it real quick, make sure you check out my Michigan hype video for the season, year 6. I'll put a link up in the corner up here as well as in the description below. You guys have been really receptive to that. I appreciate all the support, put a lot of time into that. And we've seen a lot of growth on the channel too. We're up over 620 subscribers or so, which we were at 300 just a couple weeks ago. So you guys have been great. Thank you for subscribing. I appreciate that a lot. So for each of these recruits, before I get into it, I do have all of my recruit review, my work back at MGoFish, and then freshman feature, another series continuing the class of 2020. So every single recruit in this freshman class, I have a full 15-minute or so video covering their skill set, their recruitment, everything you need to know. So make sure that you check those out. I'll link them in the description as well. All right, enough of me talking. Let's get to some highlights and start with honorable mention here. Honorable mention number 1, AJ Henning. So this was the top ranked guy in the 2020 class for Michigan, just outside the top 100. He's a burner, really good top end speed around the 4.4 range. He ran about a 10.7 in the 100-meter dash. So obviously his top end speed would be considered elite. I think he's close to playing weight. He came in a bit more polished than some of the other early wide receivers that I might have on this list, but I think he has generally better hands. He's built a little more. I think his route running can still improve, but overall he comes in as a nice, polished, high floor guy that I think Michigan can take advantage of early. I think he'll be used more of a traditional wide receiver, where the other guys might be used as like an offensive athlete. Think of how Giles Jackson was used in the backfield. I think you could see some other guys used in end arounds. I like AJ Henning as more of a pure wide receiver. Think of kind of like Ronnie Bell with what he'll be this year. I think you'll see Henning rotate in there. He is, not as tall as those guys, but I still think he'll be a contributor. On a practice film that Michigan recently put out, they showed Henning fielding punts. So they're obviously trying to get him involved. I think he has a great skill set, and like I said, a high floor for a prospect in the 2020 class. All right, honorable mention number 2 here, Kalel Mullings. So this is a guy just outside of the top 150 in the class. He was number 10 outside linebacker overall. Really solid athlete, played all over the place in high school, including wide receiver and even punt returner. So sure, it was in Massachusetts, but still he's better athlete than most at the position. One of the few concerns on his scouting report out of high school was that he was being close to being physically topped out. So that means he's just close to playing weight, which is good. He might be closer to his ceiling developmentally, but for guys that you look to contribute early, that's a plus, right? His floor is higher. That's not an additional thing he needs to get up before he can see the field in meaningful time. He's already there. So I think that's a big portion, especially for linebackers. Sometimes it can take a year or two to shape their bodies. He's already there. So I think that spells well, at 6'1", 233 on Michigan's official roster. That's playing weight right there. So I think he's the second linebacker off the bench. Tipping my hand here, there may be another linebacker on the actual list, but I think the only thing keeping him from the true top 5 here is getting up to speed mentally. Being a linebacker in Don Brown's defense, it's no easy task. It takes a bit for those guys to catch up there. And I think he will. It's just a matter of when. But again, those sort of things just take time. Physically, he's there. And with Charles Thomas recently announcing he's in the transfer portal now, you really just have a couple of true freshmen on the 2 deep at the linebacker position. So I think it'll be really interesting to see him. And I think he'll get a lot of time. And, he's got to be ready given COVID times. You never know when one of the guys has to step out. And I think he has the athleticism to do so. Okay, moving into the top 5. At number 5, it's another true freshman linebacker, Nikhai Hill-Green. This is a guy I actually wasn't that high on in my scouting report initially, but he's just been getting a ton of talk from the staff, and overall, it's great to hear. He's up to 6'1", 225 already, so again, that's close to playing weight. He's been getting, like I said, a ton of chatter for his ability to be kind of the QB of the defense. Cam McGrone lauded him for his ability to make calls. So his reads, his assignments, his keys, all the things that are impressing teammates and coaches. So that's, like I said, the opposite side of Kalel Mullings, or maybe that's holding him back a little bit. Nikhai Hill-Green, who I don't think has quite the ceiling that a Mullings might have, but mentally he's already there. So his floor is already that much higher because he's already there mentally. He's dialed in. I think he's going to be the first linebacker off the bench for Michigan, whether that's the Mike or the Will position. Again, with no Charles Thomas there, he's going to be in the 2 deep. You could have Mike Barrett also stepping in from his Viper position, since Anthony Solomon provides some depth, sort of the Viper position there. So I think of the true freshman, Nikhai Hill-Green probably will be one of the first to see the field, just because you want to rotate in linebackers, and getting that depth established at the linebacker position is really important. Of all the guys to crack this top 5, he's probably the second least likely, if not the top least likely guys I would have had. And speaking of which, number 4 is Makari Paige. This is another guy that I was impressed with, has made such an impressive showing early. I think it's also the depth chart that allows him to make an impact there. But he's the 6'3", 4-star out of West Bloomfield. And I mentioned the school because that's really important here. They run the same exact defense as Don Brown's at Michigan. And similar to Nikhai Hill-Green, lots of talk about his football IQ. Again, maybe just behind linebacker, if not more important as a safety. For you to be dialed in mentally, that's a huge barrier for a lot of younger guys to get playing time. It usually takes a little bit of time for them to actually get there. And he's another guy who they talk about his football IQ, essentially had a couple of years to learn at the high school level in a similar system, and that's paid dividends for him. Don Brown really likes his length at 6'3". He's already up to 192, so maybe you'd like to see him closer to 210. I think Brad Hawkins is about 6'1", 215 or so. So it's not a bad thing. If he can still make that work, that's okay by me. But with the need for some depth there, again, behind Hill and Hawkins, you really have Sammy Foston is a guy, and then that's pretty much it that you've heard in terms of talk at the safety position. So he really has a good chance there to break the 2 deep and get some rotation time early on, and I think he definitely will with just how that depth chart's looking. So I expect Makari Paige to have a big impact this year for Michigan. Number 3, a guy I was probably the most excited about for the 2020 class, Blake Corum. So he's 5'8", 200 pounds. He's a brick of a man. Michigan has said that they're shifting more to 2 running back formations. I think it's a position they understand. They just have a wealth of talent that they need to use. You get Charbonnet coming back. He's fully healthy now. You got Chris Evans back from suspension. Haskins established himself. Even on Turner, who outside of those fumbles that he had early in the year, looked to be a promising guy at the position as well. So it's just a plethora of guys that you have that you can really lean on there. And I think Blake Corum brings an exciting skill set at 5'8", 200. He can run between the tackles. He did for a top program in the nation that was beating IMG academies of the world. So he shows the durability even at that size. He shows the long speed with a 4.440. So I think he's a guy who's going to get a ton of run just because Michigan knows they have a lot of talent that they can utilize early here. Charbonnet is clear number 1. He's excellent in pass protection, experience last year. Evans is a clear number 1 kind of shift back and H-back, so a guy that you can shift him around, get him in routes, utilize him in the screen, even get him working, maybe not as a traditional running back as much as a Charbonnet, but that's where Chris Evans' role will be. And I like Corum kind of as a supplement to an inside runner between the tackles to Charbonnet. Charbonnet's a bigger back, Corum's smaller, but it depends on his pass pro. And I think that's really going to be the determining factor of exactly how much time he gets as a true freshman. Charbonnet obviously was a savant at pass protection as a true freshman. Corum has been lauded for his pass protection. He's a workhorse too. He shows up before anybody else. That's something that's consistently brought up from coaches, that he's just an incredible worker. So that speaks to a higher likelihood of him getting playing time compared to maybe some other freshmen. So I think the only thing keeping him off the field is that he's in the depth chart, that's probably Michigan's deepest position right now. But of the 2020 recruits, I think Corum is at the near top for my excited level of his abilities. It's just a matter of when rather than if for him. So I still expect him to be a heavy part of the rotation for his freshman year. All right, number 2, another guy I've been super high on the defensive side now, Andre Seldon. And this is one that I haven't heard a whole lot compared to other guys on this list. This is strictly based on my scouting of him as well as the depth chart, and I think his ability to just contribute right away. So I was super high on him from the start. He was a guy who seemingly went to every single camp, showed out everywhere he went. He went up against the best every single day. He was tasked with covering Julian Fleming, the number 1 wide receiver of the previous class, who went to the worst school in the country. I'm just kidding. He went to Ohio State, and he shut him down. Seldon performed really, really well against Julian Fleming, and that's a taller wide receiver. So Seldon does have the opportunity, I think, or the ability to work on the outside. I think they see his initial contributions on the inside as a nickel cornerback more valuable right now. Totally agree with that. Get him experience there. And, we've heard chatter about DJ Turner potentially on the outside. I think they're just strictly putting Seldon on the inside, so maybe we haven't heard a whole lot there. So he's more of a situational cornerback, but I think he's a guy who has the skill set immediately to play. He put on something like 20 pounds where he was closer to like 5'8", 150 out of high school. He's closer to 175 right now. So at that smaller stature, that's the size that you want for playing weight, and I think he'll be there. So I think he's game ready. I think he can contribute, and with a depth chart that's a little shaky in terms of athleticism, the only downside for him is his height. Everything else is full steam ahead. He tests really well, and I think despite that height, he's going to get a lot of run at the nickel cornerback position this year. And finally, number 1, I could say just speed and space, and you probably know who I'm talking about. It's the Hawaii native himself, Roman Wilson. This is a guy who I was actually pretty critical in my analysis strictly because of how the film was cut. There was a lot of film that was cut right before contact was made on him. He had some clips where he was giving up some fumbles at the point of contact. I was wondering whether some of that film was indicative of that. I don't think he would be getting the amount of talk he is right now if he was fumbling all over the place. Again, they've got pads on late this year, so I'm still skeptical of that aspect. But you can't teach speed, right? 4.37 guy, that's electronically timed 4.37, a 3.96 shuttle time. That 40 time of 4.37 would have been 5th overall at the 2020 draft. Shuttle would have been 1st overall at the 2020 draft. So I think early on, you get him in the Eddie McDoom model, right? Get him on the field, use that speed on some end arounds, get him potentially in the screen game. He has that sort of athleticism. He has like something like a 37 or 39 vertical as well. So it's just an insane athlete. So get him on the field as much as possible. Spread the defense out. Him being out there, even fakes on end around, he's going at such speed, it forces the defense to respect that sort of athleticism. So I think it's just something that you can't ignore with that level of speed and athleticism. It's similar to what we saw with Giles Jackson, who had a 3.86 shuttle time. Just a skill set that you can't afford to leave off the field, and I think that's what you get with Roman Wilson. How much of a deep threat Roman Wilson will be, he's actually taller. He's 6 foot, 6'1", so you can use him on the outside if it comes to that. But I think it's more about just getting him out there, use him even as a decoy to lessen the load on him. But man, you bet defenses will have to account for that guy. He's my number 1 just because of that skill set. And like I said, you can't teach speed. All right, guys, that's my top 5. Let me know your thoughts. Do you think I'm off base here? Anyone I'm forgetting? Make sure you check the description for all the full scouting reports I have on these 5 guys, plus the 2 honorable mentions. As always, stay safe out there and go Blue.